What's something you'll never tell your parents? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience. Story 1. There are many things I can't tell my mother because she always thinks it's a direct attack on her, and everything is followed up with a gigantic argument that is never resolved in a peaceful way. I'm 36 and simply don't want to deal with this anymore. Last thing I told her was about my ADHD diagnosis I got last year. It was more a, so now we know why a lot of things have been so difficult for me when I was younger information. It ended in a 2-hour-long argument that it's not her fault, however that even means in this context, and that she thinks I'm unfair for putting this on her, what I was definitely not doing in the first place. Answer: I just had to double-check the username to make sure I didn't respond to this when I was half asleep and not remember, because I could have written this. Right down to the ADHD thing. Except I haven't even told her I have an official diagnosis and am on medication. It's not even worth it, because 5 years ago, when I was suspecting the diagnosis and learning a lot about it and had some questions about my childhood that I wanted to be able to show report to the doctor, old report cards that I seem to remember were always filled with smart but lazy, does not apply herself, very disorganized and frequently loses assignments type stuff, for example. She was downright angry with me for even pursuing this and seemed to think it was an indictment of her parenting skills and how I was raised and that I was somehow accusing her of something, which I wasn't. ADHD was commonly missed in girls of our generation, especially if we managed to perform okay in school and keep our behavior in check enough to not raise any huge red flags, even if internally we are struggling all day every day. I think if any teacher or doctor had recommended I was evaluated or medicated back then, she would have done anything she was told. But you can't have a rational conversation with her about anything without her turning herself into the victim and me somehow comforting her about my own diagnosis. So I never brought up ADHD again to her. Story 2. That feeding and clothing kids isn't enough. You need to tell them you love them, hug them, show interest in them, ask them if they're okay. Say sorry for being emotionally distant parents and not just offer excuses. Just saying, I know I wasn't the best parent and I'm sorry for that. I love you. Jesus, that alone would make me cry and feel like the pain would almost go. Shimranam. Answer: my GF's mom, widowed single parent, seems to think that simply saying that one line resolves her of all previous wrongdoings, poor choices, and fixes all the problems she's passed down to my GF, despite continuing to yell and scream and cry in that order at the drop of a hat and just constantly being generally difficult and still refusing to do anything to improve her own situation, which is obviously the cause for her always being upset. Apologies are great and all, but action still needs to be taken. Stop using your tie pay, complete lack of benefits, and even tier work schedule as an excuse for everything when you refuse to even consider finding a normal job that pays better. If working yourself to death in order to block out the world is your coping mechanism, then stop complaining so much about it and making it everyone else's problem. Or get a better job and use the benefits it'd provide you to go to therapy. Story 3. I knew my mom was cheating on my dad for years before he found out, but I knew my mom would blame me for her divorce if I told him so. I just kept it to myself. She blamed me for her divorce anyway, though, so that was kind of a waste. Story 4. I spent days trying to break into their gun safe when I was a kid. Good on them for locking those up because I never got in. I didn't have any plans for once I got in. It was just a challenge, and my buddy had just gotten a cool lock-picking kit. I never could get it open, but I didn't give up until I felt like it really tried everything. So now behind that safe at my parents' house, there is a hole in the wall from where it used to be bolted to it. After giving up on the lock itself, I tried to defeat a back panel on the safe, but in the process accidentally ripped it off the wall. Eventually when they are gone, and I hope that is a long time from now, you'll have to fix that drywall. Story 5. That they're both miserable, childish twats that screwed up their lives on their own accord in entirely separate ways and forced everyone around them to be the adults as a result instead, all the way up until their retirement age and beyond. Story 6. Well, it's something I'll never tell my mom. Back in 2014 or 2015, I received an opportunity to participate in a vaccine trial for an Ebola vaccine. I remember asking my mom for advice, and she emphatically told me not to do it, and that if I did do it, I shouldn't visit any relatives. Well, I considered her advice, then I looked at the amount of money they were offering, about $2,500, and decided to do it. Got the shot, a mad fever for 24 hours, then had to go to follow-up appointments for a year. She never found out. Never did find out the results of the trial. I looked into it but couldn't find any information. The clinic was supposed to share and haven't followed up on my request for info. It was so long ago, I don't think it matters anymore anyway. Story 7. That the things my mother did well and truly me up. They're better people now, thankfully, but since I seem fine, my parents and my sister effectively believe that it simply does not affect me and that we've all collectively moved past it, I suppose. I just do not see the point in bringing it up anymore. My mother would not take kindly to having to admit that she did anything wrong, and my sister seems to like to believe that I am perfectly normal and fine, and I can't possibly have trauma because the things I went through didn't seem all that bad from her perspective. Story 8. That I had a miscarriage, including a cancer scare. I wanted to deal with it with my husband and few close friends, but it would have been stressful to tell my mom or any family member. They're great, but telling them would have added unnecessary stress to the situation for me. They would have wanted to help and would have sent articles and tips in November, but I just didn't want that. Now it's years later, and they would be absolutely crushed if they found out we hid this from them. Story 9. How much my childhood me up. I always try and sugar it slightly. My dad caused a lot of trauma in me, but I could never bring myself to tell him the damage that it has done. He was just an angry man who I've grown closer to as a friend more than a parent as we've aged. Story 10. That I never actually graduated from college. I dropped out one class short. I even walked in my graduation ceremony, but was supposed to finish the last class over the summer. Depression and anxiety got to me, and I ended up never finishing. I worked for a while as an office manager, and then my partner got a great job offer, so we moved, and I never worked again. Life turned out great, and we are now wealthy and living in the place I always dreamed of living, but it's still my biggest regret that I didn't pass organic chem 30 years ago. Answer. You can probably find a school that will get you a degree, although unless you were really good at chemistry, it might be best to avoid orgo. I am sure I've forgotten most of the chemistry I learned, but I probably could get a degree in some other subject. Western Governors University is a great online school. If you're older, like I am, many state schools have programs for seniors to finish their degree. I've always had either time or money. Finishing my degree is something I really would like to do, but now I've got health issues that would make studying difficult. Story 11. I don't promote my mom's self-written and published autobiography on social media, not because I'm not super active online, but because I actually just dislike her book. She grew up rough. I give her a lot of grace for so many things. She was just surviving a lot of the time. But her book is all about healing and growing and empowering young women. But where was all of that when I was a teenager in and out of mental hospitals, when I tried to off myself at 17? Why was I met so much anger instead of this facade of a woman I see online as an influencer and doing podcasts preaching positivity? So no, I am not helping you promote your book. Story 12, not to both of my parents, just my mother, that I dislike her, that she is a bad person deep in her soul, and that is why dogs don't like her, not because they're all mean. That when she dies, I'm not claiming her body, I'm not going to pay for a funeral, I'm not going to mark her death or put her in the family plot, that she will be forgotten and I will be free. Answer. My cat who loves everyone to the point she's annoying when people are over is my mom. She even likes the vet techs. When any kind of home service worker like a plumber is over, she's all over him, tail up pawing at him. Meow, meow, pet me. And I'm trying to grab her to get her into a room with a door so he can work. When my mom comes over, she skulks low to the ground, tail down, keeps her distance. If I call her over, she comes really carefully, keeping herself flat, and is jumpy to anyone reaching for her. My mom is always like, cats are so mean and unaffectionate. And I really don't have the heart to tell her she's such a narcissist. The cat can smell it on her. It's bizarre. I don't think I've ever seen the cat react that way to anyone else. Story 13. That one time I vomited all night and told them it was probably just a flare-up of my health issues or food poisoning. TW, I actually attempted LMAO. But my parents are one of those, you're young, you can't be depressed people. This was years ago, but to this day, they still bring it up. Oh, it was so weird. And I don't have the guts to tell them the truth, or it'd start a huge fight. Story 14. That financially supporting them full-time and alone is taking a toll on my mental, physically, financial health, and also is destroying my ability to have children. I will have one in stop cause I can't afford second. Story 15. Since I was like 7, 8, my parents sent me with that thingy basket for the Easter break feast, don't know how it's called in English, to the church for the priest to spray it with some water. My lazy ass just waited 15 minutes outside my home in a place they wouldn't see me from the window instead of going. They never noticed. I have been doing it every year. I'm 21. Story 16. How sad I am that they'll never understand me. Mental health has never been a concern of theirs while being incredibly important to me. Finding out that I'm ADHD and potentially autistic brought me to a point where I thought we could have something to talk about. But anything besides being normal isn't on their radar. And our relationship will never be what it could until they let me be someone mentally ill trying to do better. Story 17. That I have OCD and currently on medication. They always see me as the golden child, always acing the exam, get the good career and non-problematic daughter. If only they know what is happening within me internally. Story 18. That raising my siblings, but especially my youngest sister, starting from an infant, from 11-17 roiling me up and is the sole reason I'm not having kids. I love my siblings, but I have a panic attack if a baby cries around me. I remember several school nights being up at 3 or 4 a.m. trying to coax my sister back to sleep, and she cried because a 14-year-old was not emotionally equipped to raise children. Story 19. My mom is pro-Trump, pro-life, and anti-vax. She's had an abortion, not for medical reason, but purely BC it was bad timing, is an immigrant, and I studied biotechnology. I won't tell her she's the biggest hypocrite I've ever met. Story 20. How bad my drug and alcohol addiction was before I got sober. My mom knows pretty much everything that's happened to me, but I left out the horrible and awful details of a few situations I put myself in. Maybe one day I'll tell her, but I broke her heart enough by the things she is aware of. Story 21. Back in my 20s, I used to smoke. At the time, I was having a ciggy with a friend when a homeless man approached me and he had a bundle of roses. Told him I didn't have any money, but he did not want money, only ciggies. So I gave him 3 and he gave me 3 roses. I went to my parents' house later that day and I gave the roses to my mother. She swooned, but I'll never tell her they came from a homeless man and I paid for them with ciggies. Story 22. That his parenting techniques during my early childhood did actually harm me in drastic ways. Considering how he's always been there for me after that, it seems unnecessarily cruel. The man is my rock, and I couldn't ask for a better dad. Story 23. I want to tell my father to get therapy. I want to tell him that he has the emotional maturity of a peppercorn and that as much as he refuses to get help, he will only get worse. I also want to tell him to just break up with my mom. They are only staying for me and my sister, but I fear they aren't so happy together. Story 24. He'll never tell my dad I lost control of my car and came off the road. Minor unnoticeable damage. He'll never tell my mom. He'll never forgive her for the trauma she caused in my teenage years, and the only reason I started talking to her again was after both my parents almost died the same month. They divorced 6 years beforehand and have nothing to do with each other. Story 25. How little respect I have for my dad. The man is fueled by anger, and over my life, I've seen him violate every ideal or ethic he claims to uphold for the sake of indulging in being angry. He's very active in the community and postures a lot about wanting to be a good person, and I genuinely believe he wants to be one, but he's failed at every challenge to be one when it meant sacrificing his pride or showing compassion. Every act of charity he does is hostile. Raise money for the community, to fund a community watch, to harass homeless people, raising money for the Edi synagogue. It's explicitly so they can send it to Israel to kill Muslims. Not putting words in his mouth, he feels the war hasn't gone far enough. My stepbrother didn't want to show off his new baby to people for the first month or so, and my father's response? Well, he'll learn everything has a cost. He's very much an own the libs kind of guy, but he applies that mentality to everyone. Oh, and he also cheated on my mom for a decade straight. Then when my sister had just turned 18 6 months later, he moved out of their home to move in with his new GF. I mean, he's still my dad. He wasn't all terrible, and he genuinely tried to be a good father. In some ways, he was. But was always quite clear to me that his love is conditional. We don't talk much. Holiday dinners, and occasionally I'll go over to help him out with something around the house. My sisters are caught in a trap of being desperate for the dad they thought he was when we were kids, and being hurt by how he treats them and having to coddle his attitude. The man can't change, and personally, I feel emotionally like he died a long time ago, and now it's just this burden to manage a relationship. When my mom dies, I'm going to be devastated, and there will be less light in the world for the rest of my life. When my dad died, it's going to be a hassle. I don't even know what I'm going to say at his funeral. You can't just say he was angry all the time and that you dislike all his friends. He doesn't hang out with anyone. Like, just spend time with them. They only interact in their dislike clubs with each other. Whew. Well, that's 5 minutes of therapy. Story 26. When I was 18, at her request, my then girlfriend with a yellow squash I found in the fridge. Later, I washed it off and put it back. My mom ate it the next day. 30 years later, I still can't believe just how up that was. Good thing you're dead now, Mom. Story 27. I won't get married or have kids as long as they're alive, especially my aunt. Basically, I live in a culture where I'm expected to take care of them, so going no contact isn't an option. Even if culture wasn't a factor, it'd still feel like a jerk. But man, sometimes it feels like they're straight out of the 14th century. I won't force a woman I love to deal with in-laws like that. Story 28. My parents got divorced when I was 6 months old. I've seen them in the same room twice. They've spoken less than a handful of times in 36 years. They dislike each other and have avoided contact with one another at all costs. I'll never tell them how selfish I think they are for this. I mourn the life myself and my siblings could have if they could have put aside their disdain and actually attempted to co-parent us. There were so many things I never asked for or strived for because I knew it would need them to talk to each other in some way. It's hurt my relationship with my mom the most, but now as an adult, I hold my dad equally responsible. Story 29. That she is a big part of why I never had kids. I couldn't handle the fact that she would try to indoctrinate them into a cult outside of my wishes. I know she would do this because she would advise her friends who had non-religious kids to try to convert their grandchildren against their kids' wishes. I had the idea of never being able to leave my kids alone with their grandmother. Story 30. Probably that the karate lessons have come in handy. 10 years of dragging me out of the house for mon-free lessons that I absolutely D. Anyways, as a girl who just graduated college and worked at a rowdy college bar, never once worried about my ability to defend myself. Once went toe-to-toe with a busser who thought my girl stole some money from him. He was high AF. Lunged at me, and everything kicked right in. Sidestepped and kicked him behind the knees before running. That night at work, his girls tried to jump me and couldn't even get a lick in. Pulled my hair bad, the #1 lesson, run. Story 31. I'll never tell my mother her father used to hit me, and my sister and I being sent to our grandparents during the holidays. My grandfather would punch me no matter how much I asked him to stop. I complained to my grandmother, and she'd say he couldn't help it. It was PTSD. It only stopped when I got big enough to hit back, and I only had to do it once. Story 32. That I know the only reason my mom got pregnant with me was to get some of the attention being given to her sisters-in-law because they were pregnant. That I'm thankful every day for her parents who loved and raised me and taught me what being a parent and then grandparent meant, and that the only reason I speak to her is because of them. And that she and my dad may have tried to break me and blame me for everything, but I now know that they are the problem. I have broken the cycle, and my children actually love me and want to be around me, and that my grandchildren are the best parts of my life. And I have succeeded in spite of them. Story 33. Two things really, one more serious than the other. I will never tell her that I have been SRE'd. It would break her in a way that I don't think she would recover from. And I am okay doing the whole therapy thing, and I have a wonderful partner now that helps. The not so serious is that the reason I can hold my alcohol like she can was because I used to sneak drinks of hers when I was a teen. I always blamed it on my sister, who was also doing the same thing. Story 34. Back in 2021, there was still COVID, and I had a science test on Friday and didn't study shoot. So I pretended to be sick. I had smoked a J before my mom woke up. Turns out I had COVID and stayed home for 3 weeks. Story 35. To my dad that I don't like him anymore. That he was a giant cause for my intense panic and anxiety disorders at such a young age. And that I think my mom should have left him years ago. He had a heart attack recently, and my first emotion was anger. I felt like it was his fault for being so miserable. To my mom, that she ruined my childhood by knowing and seeing all of the signs of my issues from the time I was in elementary school, but professionally swept it under the rug, like she does everything until it was too late and I was in a hospital. And to both of them, that I just above all wish they were normal. That I didn't have to brace people before meeting them, and that their house wasn't so disgusting. That's it out there. Story 36. That I'm an atheist and don't believe in their God. It's mostly for my mom. She lives her religion in a beautiful way, and she would mostly just be crushed. And she doesn't shove her religion down me and my sister's throats. I've just accepted that some things are better unspoken. I don't have that need to say it out loud, just as her bond with God is sacred and only between her and her God. My truth is, for me and I'm okay not convincing her. Story 37. That when I was like 9, I would hug naked with my cousin who was 8, experiencing each other's body in the wardrobe. We were not aware of what we were doing, but enjoyed it a lot. So we kept doing it for years until we realized what it was. Story 38. Can I name a few? I dislike you and your emotional, neglect blackmailing ways. Both. I can never forgive you for not taking up the hospital of the day when I had my fingers broken by the paranoid schizophrenic when I was 10. Both. I dislike the fact you lied about having cancer. You know what me, Nanny Granddad, went through. Didn't visit me in hospital after a minor stroke. You didn't let me see Nanny before she died. Right, there's tons more. Sorry, Dad. Stop saying it's my husband's fault if my child doesn't want to visit during half-term or the summer holidays. Mom, sorry there are more, but I'll take up all the posts. Story 39, that her current husband used to flirt with me before they were married, buying me WVR I wanted, never saying no to my requests. He would even convince her to change her mind to agree with me. I didn't realize it until about a year later. He gave me a hug and I felt him press into me. I was 15, turning 16 when he met my mother. I fixed it by moving out and never returning except to visit her. I've seen her 5 times since 2012. Story 40. That I know my mom slept with an ex-boyfriend who was 25, I was 16, 27, while he was staying with her after her and my dad divorced. I told her at one point I wanted him to leave and wasn't comfortable with him always being there. She said he needed to stay with her because he wasn't lucky enough to have parents like I do that'll help their kids. He was still telling me he was in love with me while he was staying with her, while I was making it clear I didn't want him around. I don't think I'll ever tell her for her sake, and I know she'll deny it, which may irreparably change how I view her. Story 41. To that I wanted to kill myself when I went away for college, and that it's the reason why I want to do everything I can to avoid having to go back to get my master's. I'd leave for class sometimes and tell myself, if I still feel this way when I get back home, then maybe, or if I still feel this way in the morning, and as awfully depressing as it sounds, it kept me alive. I just keep telling them that it was lonely up there, but I don't want them to know how bad it really was for me. I'm way, way, way better now, and no longer in that mindset nor mental space, but still the thought of going back makes me want to cry, or makes me feel sad when it's brought up, which tells me I'm still healing from it, of course. Story 42. That I wish they would use my chosen name instead of my birth name. That I could tell my mom things without them getting picked apart, and her constantly finding a problem with my choices. I just want her to be proud of me for once and actually mean it. Story 43. You are the reason I felt like I need to save myself from our toxic home environment. If you only faced the difficult situation like parents and protected me from my older brother, I wouldn't be couch surfing at 15 years old with people. Mostly men. I don't know. It is your fault that I haven't spoken to my brother in 20 years, as you did not set boundaries with him to protect me. So don't come to me complaining that I don't talk to him. I did the one thing that mattered. I protected myself. Eclipse. Story 44. I experimented with so many drugs in my early 20s. Cocaine, ecstasy, mushrooms, acid. I loved acid so much. I'm Canadian, so weed as well, but it's never really been illegal here. Nothing really hard like heroin or fentanyl. I also didn't develop dependence on anything. I was just curious and wanted to try everything. Now I just buy weed from the local dispensary. Story 45. They don't know me as a person at all and don't really care about what's important for me, what I like and what I'm into. And I know it sounds a bit contradictory, but at the same time, they're very sensitive and introverted. So much so that they haven't built a solid social circle outside of their children and family. So I guess hearing something like that from their daughter would really hurt. I'm bi-able, and they don't even want to meet the woman I've been dating for 6 years. They've never shown any interest in my hobbies. As an example, I'm not overly feminine and usually dress in black, but they got me a heart-shaped, flowery necklace for Christmas. But the thing is, me and my brother are the only people they have, and they still expect everything from us no matter what. Story 46. Well, my mom is dead, so she either knows everything already or is beyond caring. But my stepdad is still around, and he will never know that I am the reason my Uncle John doesn't come around the family anymore. I caught Uncle John with my baby sister when she was 4, thankfully before he could do anything. John is not a blood relative. He served in the NG with my stepdad, and they were like brothers. My hand hurts thinking about that day. I told my parents John got drunk and started a fight, so I had to send him home and hurt my hand in the process. They trusted him, and while I did call the police, they basically told me to fudge off because he was a county sheriff's deputy. Told him if he ever showed his face again, we would both regret it. I have to be careful. I made a comment about things I would do to a fictional character, and my 3-day ban for promoting violence just ended. I know that if my parents found out, when they trusted him and allowed him around us kids, it would have destroyed them. Story 47. Reddit. They used to tell me to stop using screens so much it will rot my brain eyes. Guess what? Now they are on it so much and believes everything that comes up on their feed, and I'm certain it has rotted their brain. On it at least 6 hours every day on FB or some other crap. Now I'm the one telling them to get off that crap. Story 48. That I'm non-binary. They already are extremely homophobic, and when I came out to them years ago, they were horrible to me and started the process of disowning me legally. I'm so conflicted on what to do going forward, but I know I'll never tell them that I'm non-binary. Story 49. That bi. My parents literally use the hard or N word to upset me because they think it's funny, and my mom, when she isn't a psychopath, is an obnoxious jackass that would make Squidward think, okay, SpongeBob wasn't this bad. Story 50. I love them, but I don't like them as people. It's been a hard thing to reconcile, especially since becoming a parent myself. I spent the first few years of my daughter's life dealing with mental illness, in part because of childhood trauma due to their neglect. It was like this part of me just cracked open as soon as my daughter was born. But they are so ignorant, it's not even worth trying to explain on them how much they me up. I will never ever be like them. Story 51. I got a bilateral salpingectomy, tubes removed, in 2017. I saw the way politics were headed, and I was right. Best medical decision I've ever made. I don't think my mom would ever forgive me if she knew. Story 52. That until she acknowledges she abused me, I will not have a relationship with her. That the relationship I do have with her is built on the guilt I feel because she is so pathetic, it seems cruel to hurt her feelings. That I loved her once, but when she chose my brother who would lie and tell her she wanted, over showing me some love, that I stopped loving her. That the fact she made me pee myself outside because I forgot my key as a 13, while calling me a little meanie for waking her up after school, is the day I started to dislike her. That is, she died tomorrow, it would be a relief because I wouldn't receive text from the family to tell her Happy Mother's Day because she is so upset that she was not a good mother and did not love me. And that when I tell her all this, blaming her, bipolar is not the answer. I do not dislike you because of your bipolar mom. I dislike you because you lorded power over me to make me comply. You were cruel and viscous. And just because you are slower due to brain injury after your last suicide attempt, which, by the way, I was next of kin and kept you alive at the age of 19 while attending college, I do not have to have compassion or love for you. You are nasty and deplorable, and you are able to still cut people to the core if they upset, so I don't think the brain injury is all that much. FYI. The brain injury was from lack of oxygen and low body temp, 88F, by the time they were able to start working on her. I remember the times you told me mommy is going to a better place after you took all the pills. I remember times calling distant relatives, telling them mommy isn't moving and I can't wake her up. While I understand this is part of your mental illness, you've never apologized, and after the last attempt, when I didn't want to be touched, hugged, and my face kissed all over at 19 because I was on my period and need a space during that time, you threatened to kill yourself again, and I wanted to tell you then, do it, meanie. Story 53. That I talk about the trauma of my childhood in therapy, and I think about it still every single day, and vowed to never make my daughters feel the way they made me. Although my childhood appeared perfect, and they probably don't even think they did anything wrong. Words hurt, name-calling hurts, reminding you in a joking way of all your failures and shortcomings hurt. Never getting a hug or hearing I love you hurts. Story. Tirani Nafstrom. You are my abusers, the villains in my inner child story, and that's why I walked away without explanation. In becoming the parent you never were, the kind of person who won't punish others just for being themselves, including you. Story 55. The number of UAL partners I've had, although it's only 5, if my mom knew that, she'd be calling me a giant SLT amongst other things. As she tends to act like people shouldn't be having SX, she knows I've been with my current husband, my ex-husband. But that's it, plus the fact that I slept with 3 of them on the first date, for the same reason. Story 56. The true level is abuse I suffered at the hands of my ex. It's enough they know it happened in general, but my parents would blame themselves in some ways, and they don't deserve that guilt. Only my husband and my therapist really know. Story 57. That I partly blame them for why I got married so young, and ended up with a divorce after 6 years. I was super sheltered and was never allowed to date until I was 18. Once I turned 18, I fell hard for the first guy who showed me attention. I was not taught how to have healthy relationships with men. Also, my mom's gossiping has ruined the trust I used to have in her. My most vulnerable moments have been put on blast for all to hear. Story 58. that a very big chunk of my trauma come from my mother never being there for me or at all. I'm 16 now and my mother is still the same way. And the reason she's like this is because she works day and night and refuses to take breaks. And I can't tell her because I know she's trying. Story 59. How much of a junkie I was as a teenager. My father and I's brains are mirror images, so I can only assume they have an idea of some of the shit I did to myself, but it'll never be to the extent that they might think. I was a mess until I was about 20. Story 60. I could never tell my parents anything. They were never very supportive. When I had a mental breakdown in my 20s, they both approached me together and asked me, "What's wrong?" I laughed at them. They had been divorced since I was 3, and not once had they ever come together and asked me what was wrong or even what was going on in my life. Doing it in my 20s seemed hilarious to me. Story 61. I'd never tell my parents about the time I skipped a class in college just to go try that new taco truck downtown. I ditched a midterm review because I heard the birria was life-changing. Is it worth it? Absolutely. Story 62. That her trying to hide her past and her culture from me to help make me fit in More Be More American did nothing but cause a rift and trauma between us. It took me learning chunks of my lost culture and her history from my aunts and uncles as an adult to understand why she acted the way she did. Getting up multiple times at night to lock the doors, screaming if I forgot something visible in the car, etc. I can never speak to her again, but just knowing why has helped me forgive her a lot despite the rift. Story 63. How much I'm struggling to pay bills. I'm not ice soup every night, type of poor, or needing to choose between food and rent. However, I definitely paycheck to paycheck. If my car breaks down, I'm screwed. I forgot about the deadline for health insurance, so I'm paying out of pocket for meds and everything. The minimum wage went up in my state, but the maximum for free healthcare didn't go up. So now I don't qualify for free health insurance from my state because I apparently make too much. Everything is expensive. My parents tell me I can come to them for help with anything, but a lot of the time, I feel like I have to prove myself. It feels like I'm constantly compared to my brother, even though I logically know I'm not. Every success I achieve, my brother somehow one-ups me, not even intentionally. I'm trying my hardest and being stubborn about help from family. Story 64. My parents were smokers back in the day. They stopped smoking when I was a child because I have asthma. They had a very tough time stopping, so my mom started to freak out that someday me and my sister start smoking and deal with stopping. So she came up with the idea of giving me and my sister $1,000 each when we turns 18 to motivate us to never smoke. At 18, I did receive the $1,000, but I smoke weed since I am 13, 14 years old. I am 36 now. They never suspect anything. Story 65. We have a friend who has a daughter. She's like 23 and gorgeous. I can't remember where, somewhere in the Middle East, but she was held captive and held for ransom. The U.S. Embassy had to get involved in everything. Don't know too much about the story, but I do know she's home safe. Story 66. Movies and social media will lead you to believe that the world is a more secure place than it really is. One can always make a wrong turn or end up with the wrong kind of people in the wrong taxi cab, etc., all 5K miles from home or more. Please be careful out there. Answer: this is ridiculous. There is so much fear-mongering that the opposite is occurring. In the USA, people keep saying how you used to be able to have kids walk home from school on their own, or you could just walk alone, and it was fine years ago. However, the statistical data shows crime was massively higher in the 80s and 90s. It has declined precipitously, and no one even acknowledges it. Let alone if you point these facts out, people look away from you as if you are a leper who suggested everyone should have an orgy in the room. Story 67. I escaped some similarly super shady situation on my first ever solo trip when I was 18 that my mom really didn't want me to go on because she was so worried about something happening to me. It's been 12 years, but I've still never told her about this and never will because I know it would still cause her to melt down. Story 68. When I told my mom I started antidepressants, her response was, "What did I do so wrong that all my kids need medication for sleep, anxiety, and depression?" That's a good question, Mom. Maybe actually ask yourself that instead of using it as a defensive response with no value behind it. Story 69. I feel this. My mom is a narcissist and swears she was the best mom. I have some diagnoses that I really should have had early in life, but didn't get until damage had been done because she did want a child with problems. She refused mental health help for my brother, and now she takes care of a middle-aged man. She has never done anything wrong and cannot understand why we are estranged, even though she has been told and has it in writing. Answer: I moved abroad to get away from my entire family. They all have this "we are perfect" attitude, and it's really annoying. Like, my aunt is constantly beaten by my uncle, but nope, he is the perfect husband, and anyways, she fell down the stairs. And when you specifically point out her bull, she becomes super defensive and women in our family don't leave their husbands. Well, do whatever you like. It's your life. I dislike most of my family because of stuff like this. I mean, they all looked away when one of my cousins raped me when I was 12, only because they didn't want to loose their faces in public, and they all protected him because he was already 24 and would have been sent to jail if any of this came out. It's really mind-blowing to me through how many loops they jump just to pretend that everything is fine. Every time I have contact to anyone from this family, even if it's just in text form, I ask myself why the fudge I even bother with them. Story 70. I just had to double-check the username to make sure I didn't respond to this when I was half asleep and not remember, because I could have written this right down to the ADHD thing. Except I haven't even told her I have an official diagnosis and am on medication. It's not even worth it, because 5 years ago, when I was suspecting the diagnosis and learning a lot about it and had some questions about my childhood that I wanted to be able to show report to the doctor, old report cards that I seem to remember were always filled with "smart but lazy, does not apply herself, very disorganized and frequently loses assignments" type stuff, for example. She was downright angry with me for even pursuing this and seemed to think it was an indictment of her parenting skills and how I was raised and that I was somehow accusing her of something, which I wasn't. ADHD was commonly missed in girls of our generation, especially if we managed to perform okay in school and keep our behavior in check enough to not raise any huge red flags, even if internally we are struggling all day, every day. I think if any teacher or doctor had recommended I was evaluated or medicated back then, she would have done anything she was told. But you can't have a rational conversation with her about anything without her turning herself into the victim and me somehow comforting her about my own diagnosis. So I never brought up ADHD again to her. Answer: for me, it was always this "that's just how boys are" argument. So many things just got hand-waved away because of that. I went on an entire self-development spree a couple of years ago because I wanted to break through some of my habits that I was annoyed by myself. I did this before I was even thinking about the possibility that I might have ADHD, meaning I already broke through some of the characteristics that come with it, and I decided against medication simply because I experienced depersonalization when I tried it out, and I really didn't like that. Also, if that's how a normal brain works, I'm fine with how it is. Maybe I think like that because I lived 35 years without medication, but I really didn't like how slow my brain felt. I now consider this my secret superpower ability that lets me do incredible things when I'm passionate about something, with the downside that my apartment sometimes looks like I was robbed and the fact that I don't like socializing. But oh well, we can't have everything. Story 71. I got diagnosed with BPD and my mom made it all about her and said, "You always just think I was the worst mom ever, don't you?" Like, ma'am, I cannot help that I have a disease, and honestly, her reaction just spoke to how true my diagnosis really is. She can definitely fit that narrative sometimes. Story 72. I keep my family at arm's length because of conversations like this. Everything is an implication unless it's them. You can't talk about difficulties of the past because somehow that's you complaining about them. Heaven forbid you have a disagreement over something recent because they start throwing every bad thing you've ever done right back in your face. Even stuff you had no idea they were ever mad about. Protect yourself. I got diagnosed at 35, and one of the hardest parts was realizing that so many adults in my life didn't do enough. I also hope you're at peace with your younger self who was basically battling through life on hard mode and had no idea. Answer: I also hope you're at peace with your younger self who was basically battling through life on hard mode and had no idea. Funny that you point this specific thing out. I tried out hypnotherapy 3 years ago for something unrelated to that, but it was pretty obvious already within the first session that I wasn't at peace with my younger self. In fact, the reason why I was always so hard to myself was directly linked to adult me not forgiving young me. A lot of things surfaced during these sessions that I never expected to be connected to anything. I pretty much gaslit myself that I don't deserve to be happy and loved. I'm at peace with my younger self now, but realizing how destructive I was to myself subconsciously was really scary. Story 73. My parents beat me whenever I did something they perceived as wrong. Never said sorry when I proved I didn't do it. Instead, they said, "Well, you've probably done something we don't know about," so I wove to never lay a hand on my child, and I hug her and tell her I love her. Every single day. She turns 16 next week, even if we're upset with each other. Answer: I used to get smacked as a child and always got the blame. My parents also never said sorry. I apologized to my daughter from the get-go because she is a human and deserves respect. I don't smack her because it doesn't work and it hurts. I always made sure when she was younger and we were really struggling to tell her, I love you, I don't like your behavior. I heard it somewhere, IDK. Now I tell her I love you after sorting something out, and she just goes, I know you do. Like it wasn't the most obvious, most indisputable thing in the world. Story 74. I would ask you if you were me, but I made the mistake of, a while after starting therapy, having that sort of conversation with my mother. I'd never even try it with my dad, but I really thought my mom would understand to some extent. I was very wrong. So yeah, I wish I had the good sense of not even trying. It literally created a new strain in our relationship, and nothing good came out of it. Answer: therapy helped me be able to speak to both of my parents calmly and openly about our traumatic past, before it always turned into screaming matches. I had to grow up and realize that my parents did the best they could with what they had, and they didn't know what they were doing to me and my brother. Their best was very poor in many circumstances after their divorce from each other. They both made terrible decisions for me and my brother, things that we are both still dealing with in our 40s. But I had to take responsibility for my own happiness as an adult and realize that my parents were still sorting all of that out themselves when they were my age. I had to learn to forgive them for making mistakes. I had to approach them calmly and logically. After many talks and tears, my mother finally admits she wasn't the best mom. After many talks, my father admitted that he chose his second wife over believing in me, and he regrets it every day. But I told them that I forgive them. I'm still working on forgiving myself for my behavior, but my parents love me and I love them. I had to grow up and go to therapy to get there, though. The resistance is hard at first. Parents don't want to be told they made mistakes. It's when we acknowledge their mistakes and tell them that we forgive them because their best wasn't good enough, and that's okay, that we start healing ourselves. Story 75. I wish I could tell this to the parents at my school. Pickup is 3 p.m. and we'll have babies that are 2, just waiting till almost 4 p.m. for their parent to show up, still in their PJs and FaceTiming, barely paying attention to their kid who keeps asking where mommy is. Story 76. Experienced this recently. My dad apologized for all the trauma he caused me and has actively been showing me he can do better. Felt like 25 years of trauma faded away. I hope it gets better for you. And if it doesn't, I hope you find the strength and tools to heal yourself. Story 77. Oh man, I'm lucky I found my partner. He doesn't understand how nice it is to grow up with a loving family. My mother gets jealous that I'm so close to them, but I don't remember my mother ever telling me she loves me. Yet my mother-in-law tells me every week how much she loves me and how glad she is that I'm her daughter-in-law and how much she loves that I am part of the family, etc. Story 78. My GF's mom, widowed single parent, seems to think that simply saying that one line resolves her of all previous wrongdoings, poor choices, and fixes all the problems she's passed down to my GF, despite continuing to yell and scream and cry, in that order, at the drop of a hat, and just constantly being generally difficult and still refusing to do anything to improve her own situation, which is obviously the cause for her always being upset. Apologies are great and all, but action still needs to be taken. Stop using your tie pay, complete lack of benefits, and even tier work schedule as an excuse for everything when you refuse to even consider finding a normal job that pays better. If working yourself to death in order to block out the world is your coping mechanism, then stop complaining so much about it and making it everyone else's problem. Or get a better job and use the benefits it'd provide you to go to therapy. Story 79. Yeah, my father is absent, who only demands, and my mother is emotionally manipulative and narcissistic. Ever since she got diagnosed with MS, I essentially gave up a huge chunk of my childhood. I barely went out. I didn't go to camps. I didn't even hang out with my friends because I was concerned for her health. And then, when I brought it up, she says, "Oh, well, I've had to sacrifice things too. I have sacrificed so much for her, and she sees that as an expectation. My childhood is gone whilst my brothers and sister got to have theirs because they were older, and she wasn't diagnosed with MS yet." Story 80. I call this functional parenting. They do enough as required by law or some standard clothes and feed you, taking care of your essential needs so it's not bad enough to say you weren't taken care of. But it is not a nurturing parent by any means. They might pay for your interest, but aren't really interested in you. A nurturing parent would have been a lot nicer sometimes than a parent that just throws money at you. When you're a teenager, that's fine, because you don't want to be bothered with your parents anyway, and you only want money. But the years leading up to that, having a nurturing parent is invaluable. Story 81. Story of my life. I'm in my 30s battling with feeling not good enough daily about the dumbest things because my parents didn't know how to show affection. It's my fault because I should know that they love me. They don't need to say it out loud. Story 82. I dislike hearing stories like this. As a mom, it breaks my heart, and I don't know how people can treat their kids this way. I hug and kiss and tell my daughter I love her every day, multiple times a day. She's 3, so she's not annoyed by it yet. Even this morning when she wanted me to leave her alone in bed and she said, BC, I don't love you. I told her, okay, well, I love you. To me, this is the bare minimum that parents should do. Story 83. Wow, I'm so sorry that your mom is so narcissistic that chronically cheating and blame shifting is just a normal day in her life. I hope that your dad is a nicer person. I can't imagine how awful being married to someone like must have been. I hope both of you are in therapy and doing better now. Story 84. You should just happen to notice now that the same isn't fixed to the wall and offer to take care of it for them. There's a good reason for it to be attached to the wall after all, and this way, you get to atone for your sins to the living. Story 85. Both my parents are narcissists, and I never thought about it till recently, but it makes me wonder when I became child-free by choice when I was 16, 18 years old if that was the reason. I honestly didn't know they were narcissists until way later in life. My mom, I figured it out when I was 24 years old, and my dad was actually kind of recently when I was 30. I may never know, but my now husband and I had our first date 13 years ago, and I told him I was child-free, so we didn't waste any time if he wanted kids, but he said he didn't care either way. Story 86. I didn't have my own children, and I still kind of don't. My husband and I took in 2 very newly minted adults to get them both through college and came from just terrible home lives. I'm parenting them in the radically opposite way I was raised, and it does bring me a huge amount of joy. It's a lot easier with them being mostly adults. I don't think I would have had the strength, stamina, and skills to do it from scratch with an infant to adult. Story 87. I don't want kids of my own, and I never felt like I did ever. Even when I was a kid growing up, I never enjoyed having baby toys and pretending to feed them, etc. My parents say that I never showed interest in that and preferred to play with boy stuff. I'm having a hard time figuring out why that is. If I felt some kind of neglect, even as a small child that dictated it, I had emotional neglect growing up. My parents always prioritized their lives first. They just happened to have kids as well. Or if I'd still be the same way, even if I had all my needs attended. Umnar's story 88. I too am an orphan. I mean, I'm also 60, so you'd think it'd be okay. Edit. Aw, guys. Hugs for all who ended up orphans so early. I was surprised how much my mom's death affected me, and it was only 7 years ago. So you all get internet stranger hugs. And another edit for spelling. Story 89. Same. There are things I didn't mention to keep the peace prior to their death. Now I think it was the right call, since while life worked out, I guess, it would have made them worry for nothing before they passed away. Story 90. Good on you for doing it. If they do find a vaccine, even if this trial wasn't successful, it may have been a useful step along the way, so you may have contributed to saving many lives from a painful death. Story 91. I'm regretting telling my aunt about my cancer. Per the thread. Mom's dead already, so I couldn't tell her even if I wanted to. She's up and inviting herself to my doctor appointments, and I'm running out of nice ways to tell her, you don't need to come with. I have my husband. That's all I want. Story 92. My wife has some trauma with her parents, and she has tried bringing up how things have changed over the years with how they raised her siblings, but her mom gets defensive and accusatory. What do you mean I treat them differently than how I treated you? You had the same freedoms as they have now when I've seen both of their journeys to this point in life. Drastically different parents. Story 93. I did something similar, but my dad now knows about it. LOL. Convinced him that the kitten I had found in the Walmart parking lot was brought to our porch by one of the strays that roamed the neighborhood, and she wouldn't care for it. Her hissing at it sealed that last part. This was back in high school, and I didn't tell him for probably a decade. Story 94. LMAO, I did this to my dad with a kitten. I got it from some old lady whose cat had kittens. But I told my dad I found her in a ditch on my way home one night. That cat was his best friend for years after I moved out, so no regrets there. Story 95. You might ask the college if they would let you now retake the one missing class or an equivalent class, and if they would award the degree if you successfully pass it. Contrary to the views of lots of students, many colleges are actually very student-focused and want to help. Along with collect the fees they would reasonably charge you, even so many years later. It can generate feel-good positive media. Story 96. You can probably find a school that will get you a degree. Although, unless you were really good at chemistry, it might be best to avoid Orgo. I am sure I've forgotten most of the chemistry I learned, but I probably could get a degree in some other subject. Western Governors University is a great online school. If you're older, like I am, many state schools have programs for seniors to finish their degree. I've always had either time or money. Finishing my degree is something I really would like to do, but now I've got health issues that would make studying difficult. Story 97. If it matters to you, you should take that last class as a commitment to yourself. You should be very proud of your life either way, but if this is something you think about, there's nothing wrong with finishing now for the pride of it all. Story 98. Oof, I am so sorry. I think this is a more common trope than you know. The influencer mom who learned all her lessons and mentors people. People tell me all the time how great my mother is, how lucky I am, how impressed I must be, etc. I haven't spoken to that woman in years. Story 99. Mania der Schienen. I dislike how scared we are to admit to our parents that we're financially struggling. Don't want them to feel guilty of not setting you up right, paired with the fact that a lot of society sees financial struggle as a personal failing instead of the systematic issue it is, money. But I also feel like it adds to the disillusion older generations have about the current state of the economy, practically barring entry into a financially healthy adult life. Eating. Story 100. I'm sympathetic, but also angry that it's not just me in that situation. Secondary school was painful and lonely. College was great. University is painful and lonely. In secondary, it was near impossible to make friends when everyone had already formed friend groups. And the group I got closest to was centered around one individual who was just bullying me all the time. I think it was because he was the weakest of the group. Later, many of his friends stopped hanging out with him and formed other groups. I never truly managed to become a friend with any of them. College was great. We were a small group, so connecting with each other was easy. I had a great time, and all the people were awesome. Uni is a pain. Not only do I find it insanely difficult at times, I also find it difficult to engage with a lot of topics. And to some extent, it has done more harm than good when it comes to my passion for my subject. Story 101. My cat who loves everyone to the point she's annoying when people are over is my mom. She even likes the vet techs. When any kind of home service worker like a plumber's over, she's all over him, tail up, pawing at him. Meow, meow, pet me. And I'm trying to grab her to get her into a room with a door so he can work. When my mom comes over, she skulks low to the ground, tail down, keeps her distance. If I call her over, she comes really carefully, keeping herself flat, and is jumpy to anyone reaching for her. My mom is always like, cats are so mean and unaffectionate, and I really don't have the heart to tell her she's such a narcissist. The cat can smell it on her. It's bizarre. I don't think I've ever seen the cat react that way to anyone else. Story 102. An Uncle Desi kid here. I find it sad how some Desi parents move to better countries so their kids can have easier lives, but end up feeling so insulted when their kids grow up differently from them. Unfortunate, they'll never understand that. So there's really no point in saying anything. Just roll with the fact that you're a disappointment in their eyes. Story 103. Right in them feels. I am now trying to accept that I deserve better and she didn't give it to me, regardless of the situation, because I was a child. She still justifies it saying you think I prefer your brother, but that's not true. I would have preferred if she could accept it truly and just apologize, but the blame keeps falling on me. Story 104. Visit our mom for a minute and tell them. They'll be your surrogate. As someone who finished my doctorate after my father, also a PhD, and my role model died, I am so proud of you. I am excited for the road you are on and the work you will do and its impact on the world we share. Story 105. This one is definitely tough. My parents still to this day love me because I'm their son but dislike my choices. But living my life authentically has helped my mental health in so many ways, and I won't have to regret not being me. They'll have to regret not accepting me for me. My biggest advice is if you're ready, come out when it's safe, when you don't live at home with your parents and are not dependent on them in any way. My DM's open if you'd ever like to talk.